All right, thanks so much for being with us here on Atlanta News First Plus. I'm Joy Lim Nakrin. We've been covering the anticipated arraignment of the former president, Donald Trump. He is en route right now to New York from Florida, scheduled to face a judge in New York tomorrow on charges related to hush money payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels during the 2016 presidential campaign. The exact charges not yet revealed at this time. But I want to bring in a special guest to help us break down what this all means. I have with us Atlanta-based attorney Andrew Fleischman joining us. Andrew, first of all, thanks so much for being with us. Andrew, so first of all, the big question is what are these charges going to be? Because the indictment by this New York grand jury is sealed. So what is it that we expect?
I mean, everybody's just guessing, right? We don't know the indictment. We have guesses based on who testified at the grand jury and what sort of things could be brought, that it's related to whether Michael Cohen made payments to Stormy Daniels and another woman, Karen McDougal. He was then reimbursed by the Trump organization, whether those were campaign contributions, whether the Trump org or Trump himself falsified business records in relation to that, and whether those can somehow get to be a felony under New York law. But because the indictment is sealed, like I said, everybody's guessing.
Yeah, and I do want to point out to our viewers that paying someone off, hush money per se is not illegal under New York law, unless you know something I don't. But
no, I certainly don't.
But well, I know you know a lot that I don't. But about this, maybe we're on the same page. But so the way that it would be prosecuted is falsifying business records, right? So can you kind of explain how prosecutors, they see that this is happening, and then they kind of look for the law to go after the crime or the offense that they want to pursue?
Yeah, there's actually been a lot of dispute among lawyers about whether these charges even can be brought. So the big question is whether or not the intent to defraud that this statute requires means that you want to take somebody's money or not. Because Trump didn't take anybody's money. He didn't take anything of value from anybody else. He was just, at worst, he was misidentifying what these funds were for. So the big issue in this case, what prosecutors were looking at, is they're saying that their theory is that this was with the intent to defraud somebody. It was an intent to keep the state from properly prosecuting the case. But it's immensely complicated. Their theory is unusual. And I've heard prosecutors who did election work in New York say that this is an unusually weak case. So it'll be curious to see how that plays out.
Yeah. And so you're already kind of going down, exploring what his potential defense might be, it sounds like. What else do you think might his defense present?
Oh my God, there's so many ways to go. Okay, so first off, there's statute of limitations, right? Cases have to be brought within a certain number of years. He was out of state, which in New York they say tolls the statute of limitations, but there'll be an argument about that. Did they wait too long to bring the charges? Is it federally removable? He was president, of course, as you know, for 4 years. Is this crime in some way federally defensible to where he could move this to a federal court and potentially get a better jury pool? Okay, that's another issue in the case. Then you have a New York provision called sort of a inspect and dismiss. He's got to go through, and the state has to show the bare minimum that they can prove this offense, so he's going to go ahead and go through that. Past that, I would have to really look at the indictment to see what the potential defenses are. That lets me know what the elements of the offense are that the state thinks they need to prove in order to get the conviction. So we will know a lot more tomorrow. But I can tell you that, yeah, from the front, this looks like an especially defensible case. And I'm guessing he's got good counsel who will do a good job chasing these leads down.
Yeah, I'm sure. So speaking of counsel, we do know that Michael Cohen was, he was one of the witnesses before this grand jury. He testified on this matter. And in 2018, he was already sentenced to 3 years in prison for some charges related to this. So I'm wondering then, how critical he's going to be to the prosecution going forward. Is that really kind of a make or break element of this case?
Hard to know without reading the indictment. Notably, when the DOJ convicted Michael Cohen, they did make him plead to a campaign finance violation that would establish that this payment was improper, maybe with a mind towards this, but they never actually went forward and indicted the case. Maybe because Michael Cohen has serious credibility problems. I mean, he was a fixer. He was a guy who paid people off for the president, who went on TV and lied for him. And also, just as a lawyer, like somebody who betrays their client, he is not somebody I necessarily trust. Hopefully, the state will have stuff other than his testimony to rely on, like documentary evidence, video, statements of other witnesses who saw how Trump conveyed himself. Maybe the witnesses themselves, Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, who can provide a little bit more substance. Because if they are relying just on his word, even a progressive jury might acquit it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how is this process going to work tomorrow? We understand that Mr. Trump is going to be photographed, he's going to be fingerprinted. What else do we expect in this arraignment? How's it all going to go?
I would be surprised if he was handcuffed. That's not necessary. And because of New York bail reform laws, that, by the way, Mr. Trump complains about all the time, he can't be, there's not going to be any bail set for him. It's a nonviolent felony. He's not a flight risk. I mean, there's a security detail of Secret Service agents keeping watch on him at all times. There's no chance he's going to flee the country. So the most important thing that happens tomorrow is just that we will see the indictment. Everything else is just going to be theater, really. He will come outside and maybe make a statement. The most interesting thing that could happen is the judge could try to impose a gag order on Trump, preventing him from talking more about the case for fear that it might threaten jurors or prosecutors. But I think a judge is going to be reluctant to do that on the front end because of all the First Amendment problems it poses and all the ways that it might drag down and delay the case.
Okay.
Important to note, and I'm sorry I'm getting into the weeds here, there's no interlocutory appeals in New York, which means that a lot of delay tactics that he can do in Georgia to make things take forever, he won't be able to do there. So it'll be interesting to see how that works as well.
Yeah, that is interesting. So, we've talked a lot about this potential charge of falsifying business documents. Are there any potential charges that you can think of that we might end up seeing on that indictment?
I think that a falsifying business records charge, and then to make it to a felony, it has to be falsifying business records with the intent to conceal a crime, which they are likely to say would be the campaign finance violation that Michael Cohen pleaded guilty to in 2018 with the DOJ. So the claim would be that this was an improper payment to hide another crime, which was improper cataloging of a campaign contribution. That's the most likely charge that we're going to see. All the other stuff is a little bit speculative, but from the witnesses, people seem fairly confident that charge will drop.
Yeah, yeah. Anything else that we need to watch out for tomorrow? As hopefully we learn more about the indictment and kind of the grounds for it and so forth, and maybe the prosecution strategy. What do you think we could learn?
I mean, you can certainly learn a lot from how they indict the case, right? Are they bringing 40 counts or 3? So that'll give us an idea of how long they want the trial to be, how complicated they're willing to make it. We will want to look at how aggressively they're charging, right? Are they doing things that are unusual? New York has multiple courts of appeals that are spread around the state, and we'll have to look at whether or not the stuff they're doing is okay precedentially in that particular judicial area. I mean, there's just a million things to look at, and they're all kind of complicated, but I'd be happy to come back and break it down when I know more.
Yeah. So the other thing I want to ask you about is what's happening in Fulton County, right? I mean, because you and I have been on together talking about the special purpose grand jury, the recommendations for Fulton County, and what we thought was going to be, imminent indictments here in Fulton County, what many thought, I should say. And then, Trump's legal team here in Atlanta filed that motion to quash the findings of that special grand jury report, listed in that special grand jury report, right? And then, we had that judge, the judge come out with the order saying that Fani Willis, the district attorney, has to come up with an answer by May 1st and, say whether she wants a hearing on the matter and so forth, whether there should be a hearing on the matter and so forth. So that whole thing has kind of been delayed. But at the end of the day, does what's happening in New York with this actual indictment, does it play into these potential indictments here in Atlanta?
No, I'd say the charges are very dissimilar, and they're defensible in very different ways, right? Like, I think the charges in New York have mostly factual problems. The charges in Georgia have mostly procedural problems. Like, federal removal in this Georgia case is going to be almost automatic. That case is going to end up going to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, the federal court here in the Northern District. It's not going to stay with the Fulton County Prosecutor's Office in Atlanta. So I'm not sure really how they relate other than maybe it gives you a preview of some of the federal defenses that the president might raise based on his status as a former president.
Interesting. You know, obviously, hearing from Trump himself, you know, he called it a witch hunt, and his supporters are saying that this is essentially a political witch hunt. That this was basically, you know, a way that his enemies weaponized the criminal justice system and used it to go after him and charge him. I mean, again, you know, he's the first former U.S. president to face criminal charges. On the other side, you know, folks are saying, Democrats primarily are saying, this is a matter of rule of law. This is a matter of showing that no one's above the law, even if you are the former president. What do you see that supports either of those claims?
Well, the charges here in New York don't seem at first blush to be particularly strong, which I think sort of enhances the idea that it is a political prosecution. On the other hand, our history of not prosecuting presidents for crimes is not a proud one. Grover Cleveland, the first non-sequential president, allegedly raped a woman when he was a sheriff and had her committed to a mental institution so she couldn't testify against him. He was never charged for that, and that doesn't fill me with pride as an American. So we have a history of not charging presidents. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. I mean, I guess what it comes down to is it would be incredibly bad for all the other prosecutions if Mr. Trump were to come to court and easily beat this in a progressive jurisdiction. That would suggest it was politically motivated, and it will have political and legal effects downstream that I don't love. I hope that Mr. Bragg has a stronger case than I think that he does, because otherwise I think it could be disastrous.
So you think, why do you say it's not a strong case?
Sorry, what?
Well, because it sounds like you're insinuating it's not a strong case that Mr. Bragg has. Why do you say that?
Because whether or not what Mr. Trump did falls as an intent to defraud sounds like a hotly contested legal issue. And listen, novelty is fine once in a while, but you're already prosecuting a president. You would want to do it on a well-established legal theory that lawyers agree is strong. You wouldn't want to try to create new law with it, because that is the sort of thing that creates that impression, right? We always talk about going after Al Capone for tax evasion like that was some sort of proud moment in American history, but like this was a guy we were looking at trying to prosecute, and we found a reason to come after him. We were motivated to do it. That's not what you want prosecutors doing, right? You want them seeing a serious crime and doing something about it because the crime is serious, not because they're mad at the person who committed the crime.
Yeah.
That's just my take. And we talk about weaponizing the justice system. We weaponize it against Americans all the time and in all kinds of ways. It's just normally the people we select out aren't so well connected. On the other hand, yeah, people are going to look at the president, a guy who, faced his fair share of criticism from a bunch of reporters, and they'll say, this is part of a long-standing conspiracy against him that we already believed him. I mean, I really hope this case is stronger than I think it is, because I worry that a quick acquittal, or God forbid, a dismissal, will lead people to the impression that there was never any merit to any of the prosecutions, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Any final thoughts on this?
This is unprecedented, and it sucks that it's unprecedented. I really wish that if we're going to bring charges, that they would be strong, well-established charges brought within a reasonable period of time, not after the man announced for president, and not when his poll numbers keep climbing. I'm a little worried that ultimately this might not end up being good for us as a democracy, and I hope I'm wrong about that.
Well, you know, these are important discussions to have. So thanks for raising these points. Atlanta-based attorney Andrew Fleischman, we so appreciate your expertise, your analysis, and your insight, and you educating us on the law.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so we're going to keep a close watch as the former president, Donald Trump, is arraigned tomorrow in New York. He is on his way right now on a plane from Florida. So make sure that you stay with us on Atlanta News First Plus and Atlanta News First for all the latest developments.